So I don't have a problem putting decals on paper models. You see I masked off and painted some bands on the back. I believe those are for Defense of the Reich, I believe. There's all kinds of different colors. Mine is not supposed to be a specific Me-410. It's just going to be a representative. So I'm trying to use things that I think are fun. Now I went to the hobby store and found a whole bunch of swastikas. These are all illegal now. No one has them in models hardly, which is silly. But um, I got some of those, which is good. Found some in the right size. And you just use them just like you do a regular decal. I don't put any decal setting solution on things, and the paper has not been coated with something shiny. It's just straight up on the paper. And I find that they work just great. They settle right down. I'll probably give them, when they're all done, a coat of dull clear, and they'll look just like they're painted on. So I can stencil a lot of things on, make my own stencils for things like the crosses and etc. But swastikas are really kind of hard to do, or at least they're tedious. So I cheat and I put them on like this, and they are movable. Once you put them on, you can move them around a little bit, add a little water to them. The paint that you've put on there basically is plastic, I mean, it's acrylic, so there's no reason why the decals should give you any trouble on the paper. And here I'm taking my reference. I'm trying to see if I got the right angles or close enough, and the sizes, etc. The size might not be perfect, but it's good enough. It basically does what I want it to do, which is show that marking on there, which looks really cool. It really looks nice against the modeling. I really think that turned out really well. Put the other one on the other side, dump it in water, and let it go. So that's how it's going to end up looking. So I put them on the other side, and here it is, and I'm just basically checking and making sure they're pretty close, to being lined up. You got to have them even. So this is just a regular old decal thing. This has nothing to do with paper models, but you make sure that they're as close as you can get them, and when you got them right, you just let them dry. I ended up using some crosses I had for the bottom wings from an old monogram kit. And I put them on the bottom of the wings for the crosses, which is fine. I'm not going to look at the bottom of the wing too much. The tops of the wings and the fuselage I have to stencil. But they're easy because they're just white crosses. Here I'm just kind of eyeballing, saying, okay, that's the center of the swastika. Where's the other side? So I'm just trying to make sure it looks relatively good. Checking both sides. It seems tedious on video, but that's kind of what I'm doing there. And here it is all done, a slightly closer up shot. Looks nice, and doesn't look out of place, doesn't look plasticky, looks painted on essentially. And so there's the markings beginning. So speaking of stenciling, I found a bunch of stencil things on the internet, and I printed them and made them different sizes, and I found a couple that'll work for the wing and for the fuselage. Because this airplane, most of the ones I've seen, the pictures, they're just white stencils. So for instance, this one I'm going to have to cut out, and I will put it right there and give it a spritz of white paint with the airbrush. So, and then I have some for the wings as well. They're slightly bigger on the wings, and they're smaller on the fuselage. So I just diddled around with the sizing on those in a Word program. Now I'm going to use Post-it note in this roll. That's sticky all the way all on the whole length. I'm going to use that instead of like Tamiya tape, because when I use that tape, which is great for lots of stuff, when I use it for stencils, it tends to be almost rubbery, and so when you pull things pull out of whack and get out of line. So I try to use this as much as possible. So I stick pieces together because they're large crosses, and then I put some tape on those, some clear tape, just to make sure they're stuck. There's nothing worse than cutting out your stencil and then having it fall apart on you. Then I take my piece I'm going to use to cut through and just tape it on so that it is on there and you're not going to lose it. It's going to be lined up. You're not going to have to jimmy around with it at all. And then the rest is just painstakingly cutting this out. I don't show the whole thing. You can thank me in the comments. And by subscribing and making me famous. But this just takes a lot of time, just to be careful, cutting all the little pieces you're cutting out, and you're going to leave, the stuff that you cut out, which are those L's. Then we're going to do everything else, put it on the airplane and spray through it white. Not hard to do, just takes a little time. Using a paper mask like this rather than a real thin mask, um, like frisket paper and stuff like that. This you got to push down hard and do it multiple times and make sure you get all the way through. But I don't find that this gives me too much trouble. You got to do a couple things to make it stick to a curved surface, even though it has adhesion on the other side. Remember to post-it note so everyone knows what those are like. So there it is, cut out, and this is going to be for the fuselage crosses. And since I've taped them together, they'll come up nice. Try not to touch the other side with the adhesive too much with your fingers because you're going to wear off the adhesive. I might touch it up in a couple places, etc., but there they are. That's going to be fine. I can use the same one for both sides. So here I am starting to position it, and this is the hardest part of the whole job because you can't see through it. If you had frisket paper, you could see, and that might be a good thing to do. It's just very expensive. It's a clear paper, a clear self-adhesive that's lightly adhesive that people use for airbrushing things like t-shirts and on artwork and things. It really works well, but you can see through it and cut a very delicate ornate marking or something on it, or leaves from trees, whatever. But here what I'm doing is sticking it on. You can see that in the center it sticks well, but because it's thick paper, it doesn't stick around the curve of the fuselage that well. That's okay, because what I'm doing now is just kind of making sure it's going to be in line and perpendicular to everything. Because when you got those bands on there, that red and yellow band, boy, if that cross is off, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. So take your time and make sure it's, even, and make sure all I'm doing here is eyeballing it and making sure the cross is perpendicular. And when I like it and I think it's good, then what I do is take little pieces of tape and basically stick that end, try to roll it around the top of the fuselage a little bit, and that's enough to stick it pretty well. And then I put a bigger piece on the bottom because the bottom, for some reason, really needed to have a bigger, thicker piece of adhesive. But this is all just to make it so that it will stay down flat. It's surprising how you don't have to have it you have to have it as airtight as you can get it. You do want to press on it but just before you spray it, just to make sure the corners especially are down and touching the model. But you don't have to be super anal about it either, because you'd be amazed how much just a flat piece of cardboard against something, when you airbrush it, you can, there might be a slight fog under it, but generally it comes out sharp. So you don't have to go crazy, which is nice. But here I'm making sure that those inside corners are on. And the only thing hard about this part is the fuselage is very bendy there. You can push it in. There's no former there. So I had to be a little bit careful. But all I do is tap it around and make sure it's good. And then I go out in the garage and spray it with some white, using taking the tip off the airbrush so I have a very little overspray. And here I am. I brought it in. And this is kind of scary because I'm showing you for the first time. My loving audience, I haven't looked and seen if it's straight, if it even looks good. And you can see it almost looks like it's off the surface, and you'd think, uh-oh, you're going to have bleed. But we'll see what happens here. So here I am picking it off carefully. Have noticed that sometimes when I pull off the tape recently, I do pull off little bits of the paint, and right where there's the putty. So I think, adhesive properties might not be that wonderful. But anyway, I'm just kind of carefully pulling this off, and I'm trying to show you something, kind of reveal it for the first time so we both can be surprised. Carefully pulling it off, and off she comes, and looky. Now I'm looking at this and I'm amazed that it actually worked on camera. You can see it's relatively straight, looks good, the white is visible, it looks accurate. Sweet. I just got to do the other side and the two top wings, and then we'll do some letters.